Welcome in to this episode of Wear and Tear Bears post-game show. I am joined by Jacob Infante. I'm Mason West. I don't know why I didn't say my name, but I am joined by Jacob Infante, the first double dip guest of the Wear and Tear lineage. This is only 1 year, so it makes a lot of sense. Jacob, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Mason. I mean, I'm looking at it as, the Bears came up with as good of a win as you can get, really. I mean, it's against a team that they were supposed to beat, and they beat them, and they beat them in decisive fashion. So, I mean, it's that's what the good teams do. They see these games that they're supposed to win, and they win them in convincing fashion. So, I'm feeling pretty good. I don't know about you. I'm assuming kind of the same way, but it's hard to look at that game and not be excited about it.
Yeah, obviously it started off a little rough is probably too big of a word for it, but you give up that initial touchdown to Chuba Hubbard, and then I think there was a lot of funky feelings kind of going around the Bears fandom. But like you said, that was a beatdown, and that's what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to, whether it's at home, whether it's away, when it's a team that you're supposed to be, it's it's not pulling out a funky win. It's doing it in definitive fashion, which the Bears haven't really done this year and haven't had a lot of those in recent history.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at the last couple of games, all of them have been close, really. The last 4 weeks that the Bears have played, in one way or another, whether it's been a win or loss, it's been, pretty tight. So to be able to have this decisive victory it's pretty big for this team going forward. Now with the game in London that they're going to have coming up against the Jaguars next week, and that's going to be a good opportunity to build up some momentum here. You're riding off 2 wins in a row. You have the longest home game winning streak in the NFL right now, currently at 8 games. So you gotta be feeling pretty good if you're in Chicago right now.
Well, and that's a great transition to our diagnostic study, just basically our general overview of what this game was, what it looked like, and from pretty much domination in all 3 phases. I mean, special teams were kind of whatever, it just existed. Torrey Taylor did fine today, and the only real negative on the special team side was that missed field goal by Cairo Santos, which is still astounding that happens. But in the other 2 phases where you really make your hay, offense and defense, I mean, the Bears took it to the Panthers.
No, without a doubt. I mean, on both sides of the ball, it was, pure. It was clear who the better team was. And that starts with, the passing attack was strong. The run game looked better than it did to start the year. The defense was pretty strong. So it's, again, save for the, the miss that Cairo Santos had on that PAT, everything, turned out pretty well, all things considered on both sides of the ball. And, a couple of decent plays on special teams as well. So really it's, about as good of a win as you could have asked for. And again, going back to the same thing, it's beating the teams you're supposed to. They did exactly that, and they did so in pretty dominant fashion.
You mentioned the run game. So DeAndre Swift, 21 attempts, 73 yards for an average of 3.5 today. Roschon Johnson, not as many at 10. It's kind of where I would like it, kind of 2-to-1 ratio, but 25 yards for 2.5 carries and 2 touchdowns. DeAndre had 1. How much of this is the Bears finding who they are as a running team, in terms of doing a little bit more power, things of that nature, and how much of it is, well, you're playing the Panthers, who were missing their starting linebackers and then got hurt even more so as the game went on?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of both. Honestly, I think these last 2 games, especially, you're starting to see the Bears run game come alive. And, granted, it's against, a Rams defense that was pretty banged up and a Panthers defense that's pretty banged up and not as good even. But still, even in that Rams game, you're looking at a young defensive line with some really talented players there, and they were able to generate some movement up front. And in this game as well, the Bears were able to generate some movement. There wasn't a ton in terms of like massive big plays, but just pretty consistently moving the ball down the field, not allowing opportunities for tackles for a loss. I think it ended up being 1 run play for a loss the entire game. And then another tackle for a loss was a sack. So they were pretty consistently moving the ball down the field in the run game. I think part of that comes down to the O-line finding their identity, the play calling, finding what this offense is best at in the ground game. And part of it, too, I think DeAndre Swift deserves some credit because he's looked more decisive. He's looked more explosive. And he's been able to pretty consistently make some plays. And unlocking him in the passing game, too, has been pretty huge as a as a screen weapon. He's really thriving when he gets more of that space to work with. So, yeah, I mean, all things considered, it wasn't pretty. It wasn't super flashy in the run game, but it was good, and it got the job done. They ran the ball in 3 times for touchdowns. Would have been 4 with that Caleb Williams run if it didn't get called for a penalty. But all things considered, a strong enough game on the ground to complement the passing attack for sure.
Well, I'm glad you highlighted that, because even more importantly than the run game itself, because that is obviously very important for your rookie quarterback, just to say, hey, you don't have to do anything here. Give the ball to someone else and let them do their thing. But also to set up the other layers of the passing game. We actually being able to see and have some play action that was available. One that I thought of was that naked boot, I believe it was. And it ended up getting called back because of penalty. But they got a first down. They eventually punted. But it just was that peak Caleb on a rollout. Doesn't have to decelerate on his throws. That's one of the things that makes him so special when he does. Yeah. When he's on the move, is that he can just run right into the throw and be accurate with it. And you're able to do that more this game. In terms of that run game, like you said, DeAndre Swift also just getting way more north and south. He's not trying to dance as much, or at least it doesn't seem that way. Like everything doesn't have to be a home run with him. Yeah. One thing that was interesting, and I highlighting just the run game, was, like you said, kind of the personnel and who they are. Tevin left the game today, and then they didn't go to Davis. They went to Bill Murray, not the comedian. I have to say this because it's just the Chicago thing. Not the comedian, but the the guard who actually got into a bit of a scuffle later in the game. But before we get there, what are your thoughts on going to Bill Murray at that point to replace Tevin Jenkins and not to Nate Davis, who has recently come in when a guard has gotten hurt, usually kicking Pryor out to tackle?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. At this point, it's a matter of who you think your best 5 are going to be, depending on who's available. And if you think that, Bill Murray's a better left guard than Nate Davis is at left guard, then, so be it. With Nate Davis typically playing right guard, that's where Matt Pryor is right now. Maybe it's the whole matter of, you just don't want to, throw him in and switch him. And they see Bill Murray as a true backup at left guard. But, I mean, they kept Pryor in. Like when Braxton missed a play, they kept Matt Pryor at left tackle and then Nate Davis at right guard. So who knows? I think it's telling to see where Davis is at this stage, where he's not, a go-to, we can just throw him in wherever. I think it comes to show that, the results just haven't been there. And as long as, at least off of my first initial viewing, Bill Murray didn't do terribly enough to the point where it's like, this is actively holding the team back. Maybe they should put Nate Davis in there. Like I didn't notice upon first initial viewing anything terrible from him. And that's typically a good thing for an offensive lineman. So, we'll have to go back and see if that's exactly the case. But I mean, I trust that, they'll get their best 5 out regardless of, where they're going to be, who it's going to be. And if they think Bill Murray's better than Nate Davis at this stage, then, they're the ones in there every single day at practice. So I'll, take them for their word.
Yeah, exactly. Like you said, as long as you're not noticing that offensive lineman, you're probably doing a good thing. I do find it interesting. Usually a good coaching staff, and I'm not saying the Panthers are a good coaching staff, so maybe this is part of the problem, will then go to attack whoever gets subbed, right? You see it all the time. A new corner comes in, and all of a sudden that's where the ball's going. You see usually a new guard, a new center, or something comes in, and that's where you put some pressure at. And the fact that either we didn't notice it or whatever the case may be, good sign for Bill Murray. And he was talked about. If people recall, go back to the end of the summer, Eberflus called him out by name a couple of times. So, at the end of the day, and polls did also say this is the best depth he has had on the offensive line. Now, I'm not saying that no one get, in a tizzy here, anything special more than that with Bill Murray, but at a minimum, hey, that's usually a team's weak link. You get to December and all of a sudden, your injuries are piling up.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a good point. I mean, I honestly have to agree with looking at the offensive line depth. I mean, obviously with backup offensive linemen in the NFL, you're not going to get like superstars typically, but it's, you're looking at it. Matt Pryor stepping in, he was a backup and, he's looked decent enough at right guard in replacement of Nate Davis. Bill Murray showing he can, be something. Doug Kramer, maybe a little bit more of a fullback at this stage than a true backup center, but he's, getting playing time. And then you still have Karana Magaji, who got a little bit of time as like a 6 offensive lineman type. And Still have to see what he can do, but there's something there. And I'm not going to sit here and say this offensive line is amazing. There's still plenty of upgrades that need to be made. But as far as the backups go, I mean, I'm fine with them sticking with, the same backups they have right now, just making maybe like 2 or so substitutions in the starting lineup this time next year.
I'm glad you brought up Karan because I think this is perfect for him. Like, it's essentially should be a red shirt, and in just sprinkling him in a couple of snaps here and there, right? Get a feel for the speed of the game, all that stuff. To me, is the perfect way to use Karan. I don't want to have him start really at any point for a variety of reasons that have been talked about to death. So I don't think that we have to necessarily do that. But before we move on to the defense, we do have to talk about this receiving core because they definitely had a day in particular. DJ Moore, 8 targets, 5 receptions, first 100-yard game with 105 and 2 touchdowns. Cole Kmet, 3 receptions for 57 yards. And even, Keenan Allen got involved with 3 catches and Roma Dunze with 5 catches. I mean, Caleb spread the ball around. I didn't even list everyone that got catches. You can throw a couple more names out there. Caleb spread the ball around. Overall, a great performance. It looked like from the routes that were run, one weird drop from DJ Moore. But, I mean, this is kind of what we had hoped for leading into this year, knowing who was available to be a pass catcher. Today was a good example of that.
No, absolutely. And I'm looking at this performance as proof where it's like, okay, say the Bears have only one 1,000-yard receiver this year. Say it's DJ Moore. But a lot of those guys, a lot of other guys are in that 700, 800 range. Like, say, a Cole Kmet, a Roma Dunze, a Keenan Allen. I'd be happy with that, honestly, because you're seeing it's going to be tough to throw for over 300 passing yards every single game. But, I mean, Caleb's already done it twice in 5 weeks. And that's like I went back to do some of the research on it. That's more than Rex Grossman did as a starter. That's more than Kyle Orton did as a starter. And just because I feel like stirring up shit, am I allowed to say that? Oh no,
it's whatever.
I don't know, but anyway, Justin Fields only threw for 300 yards one time, and Caleb's already done it twice. So I think that says more of like a low bar that we hold Bears quarterbacks to, but if you can get maybe a couple more 300-yard games through the air for Caleb Williams, you're going to start to see some good production. And you have so many weapons that, sure, DJ Moore can have a great game, but everyone else can just be solid, and that's enough. Guys were getting open pretty well. Guys were, taking advantage of the coverage that they had to work with pretty well. And yeah, even if, say Roma Dunze had 40 yards on 5 catches, it's not an unbelievable stat line, but it's solid. And it shows that when they call on him, when they ask him to do, when they ask him to execute on his assignments, he can do it. When Keenan Allen was asked to execute on his assignments, he was able to do it. Same with Kmet, Gerald Everett, they still love those tight end screens, which I'll never understand, but there's a little bit of progress, I guess. And then DeAndre Swift as well. So I'm feeling pretty good about, just from a production perspective, the ability to, spread the ball around. Don't necessarily force it to one specific guy, just whoever's open, and you have multiple effective receivers from there. So I think that's the best case scenario, honestly, is just moving the ball, taking advantage of the fact that you have a pretty loaded weapon group and just spreading the ball around.
You mentioned that low bar that we have as Bears fans. Bill Zimmerman tweeted out, follow him at Bill T. Zimmerman. Caleb Williams has thrown for 1,091 yards in 5 games. He passes Zeke Bradkowski, who had 1,087 for the 6th most passing yards as a rookie in Chicago Bears history. Caleb Williams on pace for 3,709 passing yards on the season. That would be the 3rd most yards in Bears history, not just as a rookie. So, again, yes, Bears bar, pretty low, but at some point you got to raise the bar, and maybe this is the year we do it. Go on to the defensive side. We have to talk about the defense because, yes, this Panthers team is straight doo-doo. It's not a good team, and it got worse today, all those injuries. But, I mean, the defense showed up. Tyreek Stevenson had a couple of great plays in particular that I wanted to just bring up because as that second corner, you're always going to be the one that's more targeted when you're opposite of Jalen Johnson. And he was able to blanket a Deontay Johnson at times. He had a pass breakup on an important 3rd down, and Deontay's a great route runner. So the fact he did that, Kevin Byard finally got in the turnover category with a really good interception, ran the route basically for the wide receiver almost in that way. And Tremaine Edmonds forced a fumble. This is the Edmonds season. The much maligned, paid way too much for what he produces, yada yada guy. But I mean, so far he has made some amazing plays, and that's not even getting to the defensive line. Austin Booker had a sack. You talk about Andrew Billings for some reason not being blocked, but what his impact is. I mean, I can keep going, but the defense is showing out and continues to do so week in, week out, even if it is still more of that bend but don't break mentality.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think the defensive line deserves a lot of credit too, because they came away with 10 quarterback hits and 4 sacks as a total. A couple half sacks being thrown in there. I know you mentioned Austin Booker, Andrew Billings, Javon Dexter all had sacks. DeMarcus Walker and Kyler Gordon split a sack as well. Javon Dexter just continues a tremendous start to the season. I mean, he's now up to, 4 sacks in 5 games, and he had 4 quarterback hits. And I'm going to be interested to see what the pressure numbers look like, because I know PFF will be coming out with those, probably tomorrow. But things look really good, I think, with the defensive line as a whole, at least rushing the passer. I think stuff in the run, still a little bit of a work in progress. I know Chuba Hubbard had some opportunities to break free and get to the second level. Like you said, Tremaine Edmonds cleaned up pretty well. TJ Edwards has some nice plays. All the secondary competed hard. Not too many blown assignments. Physical, in defending yards after catch. Physical in the run game as well. So I think this is a defensive performance you can look at and feel really strong about. And like you said, I mean, it's the Panthers. It's not that's not the world class of the NFL by any means, but like we keep saying, it's a game you're supposed to win, so you better do it decisively. And this is exactly what the Bears defense needed, I think, to show that, hey, this is a legit unit. And it doesn't matter who the competition is. They're going to fight hard. They're going to compete. And as cliche as it sounds, I mean, you saw the hits principle, in full action on Sunday today.
And this is a team that rallies to the ball. This is a team that you see the extra effort. Take the Billings sack. I mean, he not once but twice as Andy Dalton's going to the ground. You see him punching at the ball, trying to pull that out. You saw that on the Mingo deep reception where he's got kind of lost in the coverage. But as soon as the defense does get there, they're all pulling and ripping at the ball. So this is something that's important. It's as I know Danny and I have talked about this a lot, where people laughed kind of at the hits principle and what Eberflus has talked about, but it is important.
No, absolutely. And I mean, I think it shows everyone likes to hate on, you have a saying, you have a motto, you have like an acronym or whatever. But what it comes down to ultimately is it comes down to the core principles of working hard, being physical, not afraid of, fighting through contact. And I think you can look at this defense and say this applies to the whole starting lineup. And I think that, are there better defenses? Maybe, but there aren't too many of them. And I feel like as a cohesive unit, we're seeing this defense really shine. Even in losses, the defense hasn't been terrible. They held the Texans, and, we're seeing how good the Texans offense is. They held the Texans to less than 20 points. They held the Colts to 21. Which I don't know. I still feel like that's a game that they should have been able to pick up the win in. But whatever. The Bears are 3-2. They're above 500. They're winning games, and there's only so much that I can complain about. So I think as a defensive performance, it's as well-rounded as it gets almost.
So what other defenses, just off the top of your head, would you say might be better than what the Bears are putting out there right now?
That's a good question.
Because I'm trying to think too, like off the top of my head, who is like actually actively a better defense right now. And I'd have to sit down and think of the fact that I can't immediately come up with, because some of the bigger hitters, the Browns, like the Ravens, you always think about, they have holes right now, and they've given up a decent amount of points in certain games.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say honestly, the Vikings defense has been looking really good. I think Brian Flores has that unit performing well. The Jets defense is another one too. Other than that, though, I mean, that's something I'd have to go back and check. Like, I feel pretty confident the Bears have a top 10 defense in the NFL. Is it top 5? I mean, maybe. I don't know. That's something, just need to do a little bit more research to be able to clarify that. But it speaks to how well this unit is performing, that's even a conversation at this point.
Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. So we are going to pop into a quick break, and then we will be back momentarily. It's the greatest time of the year again. Football is back, and it's here to stay till February. Over 1 million fans across 33 states got in the game last year by making picks on Underdog. Signing up with Underdog is smooth and easy. I especially like using their mobile app as it makes making picks easy as hell. Something pretty cool is their vulture protection. Get your entry refunded and receive a promo if a vulture leads you to a loss. You define a vulture as a rushing touchdown scored by a player not designated as a running back. I also love the variety they have compared to other betting sites and apps, such as their 4-person battle royale. Just pick players this week and profit. Making picks on Underdog is straightforward, and signing up is even easier. Just head over to Underdog's simple-to-use mobile app or UnderdogFantasy.com. Sign up with promo code CITY, C-I-T-Y, and Underdog will give you a free pick to use on your first cash pick'em entry, plus up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you deposit. That's Underdog Fantasy, promo code CITY, to claim your new customer special of a free pick and your deposit offer. You could have been like me and had Cole Kmet have a touchdown and didn't, so I was sad about that. But anyway, you must be 18 plus, 19 plus Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus Maine and Arizona, and presents in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.mpcgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. So now we're going to pop into some of our categories here. First one, so as we thought. This is basically something that we expected to happen that did, and something we were a bit surprised by. What was something you expected to occur and actually did play out that way on the field?
I mean, this sounds like cheating. I'm just going to say the Bears winning. I guess that's one in particular where I expected the Bears to come away with a victory here. And just judging off of what the Panthers have looked like this year, I mean, under Andy Dalton, the offense has had a little bit of life, but the defense has been pretty bad, all things considered. I went through to look back, and that's now 4 out of 5 games that the Panthers have played where they've allowed more than 30 points in a game. And the other one, they gave up 26 in a 26-3 loss to the Chargers. This is an opportunity where, everyone looked at the Bears schedule, like this stretch of games here, and be like, all right, they'll probably be 3-2 coming out of this, and they were. It's a good opportunity now. Carolina, Jacksonville, Arizona, New England, in theory, those are all winnable games. Washington's going to be interesting. I feel like that's one where they've definitely better than everyone thought they would be. So that's not so much of I think they're going to win that for sure. But I mean, in theory, it's still potentially a winnable game. So if you come away, the next 4 games that the Bears have, if you win 3 of those, then you're looking at what, 6-3 heading into divisional play. And I mean, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a gauntlet in the NFC North this year. So the more wins you can get in your, out of your division, the better. And I think the Bears are about where many people expected they would be. And I think this is a game that many people expected they would win. I didn't think they'd win by as much as they did, though. So that's something I will give to Chicago, that they, outperformed my expectations too, even in, what was expected to be a win. But regardless, there's a lot to be excited about with this one.
I thought that the Caleb DJ Moore connection would really continue, if not take off this game. If you go back and listen to the preview show I did with Danny Meehan this last Thursday, and everyone should be listening live or afterwards and podcast to that show. I think it's Thursday, 5 p.m. I don't know why you're not listening to it, bare bones. I had my bold prediction was that DJ Moore would have 2 touchdowns, one of which would be a 30-yarder. He had 2 touchdowns, 2 of which were 30-yarders. And so I definitely was someone who I subscribe to the whole communication where part of it is only what you say, and a lot of the other rest of it is how you say it and body language. DJ Moore's was not the greatest early on, but it's an understandable frustration. That wasn't something I necessarily held against him. I just simply said I would like it to be better. That was it. End of story. And he is a professional, though, and you see what being a professional gets you. It's not that. I'm sure him and Caleb, a lot of talks behind the scenes. We saw that live even last game on the sidelines when there was some miscommunication, and that is getting cleaned up, right? So as I thought, that connection is going to continue to keep getting better and better. DJ's here for the long run. Caleb also here for the long run. I was a bit surprised by how clean the pocket was for Caleb this game. I don't love the offensive line still, and even if the Panthers weren't exactly the best pass rushing team, I believe they were 24th in something like that in terms of pass rush win efficiency rate coming into this. But we also saw against the Rams, we saw against the Colts, who also weren't highest in those categories, that the Bears offensive line struggled still a bit, keeping Caleb clean, but it was a lot better today. And that was something I was surprised by. And as a little sub thing, I'm surprised even with what we saw in college, the amount of wiggle he has. It is so cool seeing him run because it's very different than, let's say, Justin, where Justin was just a super athlete, just speed guy, strong. You can't really bring him down in that way. You could take Lamar Jackson. He's more Lamar Jackson-esque, even, I would say, where Lamar just has this wiggle about him and he falls in a way that he just doesn't get hurt a lot. And Caleb has something similar. He's not burning by you. He's not necessarily running you over, even though he will lower the shoulder every once in a while. We even saw that today. But that's just what he can do to just create a little bit of space, slide by, and keep going. It's really cool to see.
No, absolutely. I think that's a good point, honestly, with the the wiggle. I think that's a good way to put it, because I was watching the game and I was thinking kind of the same thing of what's the best way to describe Caleb's subtle agility, I guess. He's not, I wouldn't say he's like a Lamar level athlete in terms of he's got, all this spring in his step. He can maintain, all of his momentum, but he's so coordinated and so nimble with his feet in his way to evade defenders, whether that's, evading the pass rush or as a runner out in the open field. So I think that's a very good point too. And something that I've been, one of the few things the last couple of weeks that I've been kind of, pounding, on Caleb for is, hey, you have some good opportunities to run, take advantage of it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the last 2 weeks, previous before this one, he was a little too conservative. And I mean, granted, he was accurate getting the ball out. He was decisive, making good plays. He's not being reckless with the football. And I don't think we saw him be reckless with the football here today. But I think we saw a little bit more that he was able to, extend the play with his feet and know when to take off rather than just keep scrambling, throw the ball away. And he's athletic enough to pull that off. So I think that's a good observation. I think the one that I'm a little bit surprised by that I didn't think was going to happen was I honestly expected Andy Dalton to push the field a little bit more against this Bears secondary.
Yeah.
And I know that, it's a pretty good secondary. We've seen that this defense, like we keep saying, is one of the better units in the league. But watching what Andy Dalton did in the previous couple games before this, I mean, he had 220 passing yards against the Bengals, 2 touchdowns. The game before against the Raiders that they won, he had 3 touchdowns and threw for over 300 passing yards. Both pretty strong outings in, the grand scheme of things. So for him to be held to 136 passing yards is pretty impressive. And I think that speaks to the competitiveness that the secondary has at the catch point, their effort when the ball's in the air to go and, track it down and make plays on the ball. I know you mentioned Tyreek Stevenson earlier. He had multiple breakups. Brisker had one. Kevin Byard had his interception. So Jalen Jones had 2 pass deflections too. And I think that was something interesting as a depth kind of guy contributing and making plays on the ball too. So, and I keep saying, I expected the Bears to win this game. and that's 100% true. But I didn't expect necessarily for it to be by 26 points. I didn't necessarily expect Andy Dalton to be limited in the way that he was, just because I keep thinking it's a smart cornerback. The best way to move the ball down the field against this Bears defense is to dink and dunk, and the Panthers didn't really do that well. And I thought that was the strength of Andy Dalton's game. Historically, it has been, but that didn't necessarily show up in this one.
Yeah, my fantasy team did not love the fact Deontay Johnson did so bad, but obviously my Bears fandom was a big fan of that. And I think that's a really good point. I really thought that there would be more just field goals opportunities, long drives, like you said, dink and dunking along the way, where all of a sudden, it's 3 points here, 3 points there. But I mean, you held them to 10 points and it wasn't even really close. It was really tough sledding for the Panthers. And I think if you're a Panthers fan, you were sitting there very frustrated most of the day.
Oh, 100%. And I mean, it's got to be frustrating, right? To see an offense that's so lacking. And I mean, especially coming into the year with Bryce Young performing as poorly as he did, for him to get benched. I mean, things aren't going the way that Carolina wanted it to be by any means. For the Bears, it's going great. At least from a Panthers perspective, we want that second round pick to be as high as possible for our favorite team. But yeah, I mean, it's got to be difficult. There are a couple Panthers fans that in particular that I don't feel bad for, but for the most part, I mean, they've been struggling, and you can't be feeling too great after such a decisive loss like that.
Hey, if you're listening to the broadcast, though, apparently you cannot say who won this trade yet because the Bears make the playoffs first, or whatever shenanigans was said.
Yeah.
All right, next one. It's going to be a good day. This is just something positive that we're taking out of this game. There's a lot to take away. I'm just going to double dip on something you already kind of mentioned, that the fact that this is Caleb's second 300-yard passing game and that it only took 5 games. You mentioned Justin Fields only had 1, not trying to pile on guy. There's a lot of other issues besides what Justin was doing that contributed to that. But you can even go back. Mitch Trubisky had 8 his entire time with Chicago. So, and I said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm mad at myself, and I'm an idiot for my eyes looking back at some of the past quarterbacks that the Bears have had and been like, yeah, don't worry. All we need is ABC 1, 2, 3, and this will be a successful team, or this guy can be a top 15, a top 10, arguably a top 5 guy. That just hasn't been the case. Like it's way different seeing what Caleb can do and how he throws the ball, the command that he has, the fact that just we can see it, second 300-yard passing game. And again, I am mad at myself for thinking some of these other individuals in the past, while I do still support them. And I was, no ill will against any of them, but Caleb is just a better prospect.
Yeah, 100%. And I think some of the things you're seeing from a mental capacity are stronger than some of the other quarterbacks, especially the young ones that we've seen, play for the Bears over the last 10, 15 years or so. The ability to, when he used that eye manipulation to look off the safety and free up an opportunity for DJ Moore to, grab that touchdown in the tight window. That's a one-on-one 50-50 ball rather than, having a center fielder single high safety, competing on that jump ball as well. So I think that was something. The decisiveness and how quickly he gets the ball out and how often he gets it to the right read is really impressive. So I think, just from a mental capacity, you can really see that Caleb's leaps and bounds over any recent rookies the Bears have had. And, even going back for, however long, I know we kept talking about, Caleb already has more 300 passing yards than Justin Fields, already also more than Rex Grossman and Kyle Orton too. And so it's not just piling on Fields. It's just historically the Bears have had a lot of, for lack of a better term, stinker performances from quarterbacks, especially in that rookie year. So I think that for him to be putting up the numbers he is this early in the game is really encouraging.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. All right. Concussed corner. This is something in the game that was so odd the decision maker must have been concussed. Overall, pretty positive game. I'll stay on the Bears side. And when things got a little chippy between Bill Murray and J.C. Horn after Roschon's second touchdown, Matt Pryor throwing a punch. I get it. You're getting hit and pushed and all that. You're just trying to help your teammate, who was also getting chucked around a little bit. But
Yeah.
offensive line depth is hard enough as it is. You're spanking the Panthers. We can't have you ejected, even if a game that's in hand. What's that longest yard quote? A broken bone will heal, but a lost the mean machine lasts forever.
Yeah.
You got to finish the game, dude, because there might be a time where you are not winning by 26 and you need to be in there. So Matt Pryor, dude, come on, dude. We can't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good choice. That would probably be mine as well, honestly, just because that stands out as a particularly boneheaded decision. And there honestly weren't too many from the Bears today, which was pretty nice.
Yeah.
So I'd say, yeah, just you can't, when things get chippy, naturally that can happen in football. It's a contact sport. It's a lot of adrenaline, a lot of testosterone running around. People get upset, but you need to make sure to get your emotions in check. Don't go swinging at people. And I mean, I never really understood why people do that in the first place. Like, you're punching a guy with a helmet on, like that's probably going to hurt you more than it does the other guy.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of slim pickings for this one to go off of, but at the same time, I mean, it's, you can't be doing that. You can't, you got to make sure, like, you stick up for your guys, but you don't go throwing haymakers, in the fourth quarter of a game or anything.
Our next one, we here for moral support. This is something that we want to see worked on going forward, just something that needs a little support. What would yours be?
Yeah, so I think mine, and I touched on it briefly earlier in the show, would have to be the interior defensive line run defense. And I think that I'll preface it by saying Javon Dexter and Andrew Billings have been tremendous this year, particularly on passing downs. Dexter's ability to get to the quarterback, Billings' ability to put pressure on the quarterback. And, as we saw today, he got his sack as well. It's been really impressive, and it's been a major turnaround from last year. There's really a lot to be happy about, from this Chicago Bears defensive tackle room. But, whether it's those guys or some of the other players they're rotating in, I mean, there's some chances up the middle for, like we saw with Chuba Hubbard, some of these other running backs that we've seen against the Bears. Kyron Williams had a pretty solid game, all things considered. Jonathan Taylor did the week before as well. You just need to work on like plugging up those gaps and, either not getting pushed off the ball, or if you are standing your ground, to know when and how to disengage from those blocks. So that's something that I want to see worked on these next couple games. I think especially once you get, the Packers have Josh Jacobs, the Vikings have Aaron Jones, the Lions have Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. I mean, those are all really good running backs, and it's going to be tougher to win those divisional games if you can't stop the run. So I want to see that worked on these next couple weeks. But yeah, I mean, that's not to take away from the overall performance we've seen from the defensive tackles, because it's been pretty strong.
I mean, I agree. I have the exact same one, to be honest. Just this interior defensive line, it's a problem right now, unfortunately. If you look at the Chuba Hubbard's 38-yard touchdown, and the Bears will start that was the 17th run of 11 plus yards versus the Bears this season, and the longest to date, that 38-yard run. Wow. If you look at it, Chuba Hubbard had 97 yards on 13 attempts and averaged 7.5. Even if you take out that 38-yard run and look at it from that, he still was averaging 4.5 yards a carry, right? You hand it off 3 times, you get a first down, but you can't do that. You mentioned all the other teams that the Bears have struggled so far stopping the run with, and as you mentioned, all the teams going forward that you're going to have to. So even if you look specifically at that Hubbard run, Billings was trying to dive across 2 gaps to make the tackle. So I don't think that's an Andrew Billings thing. They ran pretty much right at Chris Williams, right? The guy that they brought in to get some depth. You're missing Zach Pickens. I know people have kind of a love-hate relationship with him, but at least he was a functional defensive line player that you could have there and could make some plays. They just don't have that right now. So when you do sub out one of Dexter or Billings, now all of a sudden there's a target. Sometimes, and this is something that I know you've rallied against, I know I have for sure too, is when and how often you are making some of these defensive substitutions. You'll see it's like in the red zone, and for some reason Sweat and your 2 starting defensive interior guys are all out. And it's like, I get it, you're tired, but you can't take all three of them out. So this is going to be a problem going forward. I don't know how you necessarily shore that up right now, unless there's someone on a practice squad that you're trying to poach, or Pickens can come in and give you a little something. But he already tried coming back and then got rehurt. So I don't even that the groin stuff is always funky. That's a tough thing to come back from. So that's not something I would write in pencil, let alone pen.
Yeah, and I mean Pickens has been solid in spurts so far this year. Obviously, the injuries he's been dealing with. I think if he can be just a good rotational guy, I mean, because the Bears don't need him to be a starter. Billings and Dexter are both playing well, but if Pickens can be like just a good rotational guy, then that's an upgrade over what they've had the last couple games to work with. So, I mean, time will tell. Like you said, maybe they'll make some sort of adjustment elsewhere, bring someone on in free agency or practice squad or something. I feel like it's a little too early to make any trades for players. That they'll probably pick up a little bit more during the trade deadline. But even then, like you're probably not splashing on a defensive tackle if you're Chicago, because they've got other needs elsewhere that are more pressing. But maybe like a 6th, 7th round pick or something for a backup type guy, might not be the worst idea.
Yeah, I mean, the only name that even remotely like flashy that I could think of would be Jonathan Allen with the Commanders. But considering how well they're doing this year, I mean, do you even want to trade him anymore, or do you think you're now closer to being relevant with Jane Daniels and what they're doing? I mean, they could very easily win that division with how also bad the Cowboys and Giants are, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
All right, quick break, and then we'll get to the last portion of our show. Welcome back. What's important? Stat. This is a stat from the game that we felt was important. Pretty straightforward. Jacob, what do you have?
So the most important stat, I think that's a tough one. So I'm going to have – there are a handful of different ways that you can go with, but I'm going to say here's one in particular. So at halftime, right, heading into the second half, ESPN gave the Bears a 97.6% chance to win. And keep in mind the score was 27-7 at that point. It ended up being 36-10. So the Bears still outscored Carolina in the second half. But I think it's that strong of a second half performance or a first half performance where you can get off to that hot of a game, and knowing that you still have the ball to start the second half, I think is just, it makes it that much more difficult for the opposing team to come back. So obviously, those win probabilities, there are, so many factors that can, have those turn out to be wonky or whatever. But I really do think that's, that puts into perspective really how strong the Bears were coming out of the gate. And you saw a couple of those sort of games last year where the Bears, look really strong in the first half, but then they fall apart in, almost comedic fashion in the second half and then lose those games. That's now 2 games in a row where the Bears have held the lead for the majority of the game and didn't let it go. And I think that's something worth, sure, it's against a beaten up Rams team and it's against the Panthers, who's also beaten up and just not good. But it goes to show that are these the type of games that the Bears would be winning last year? I don't think so necessarily. So not with that high of a win probability, that hot of a start, and then to be able to stand your ground and to be able to stand and stick with that lead, I think is that's showing some growth from last year with this coaching staff and this defense as a whole, in my opinion.
I'm going to go with kind of just a conversation of 3rd, 4th down red zone, like efficiency here. So today the Bears were 4 for 11 on 3rd down, 36%, which pretty much matches what they've done for the year. They've been at 33.3%. So we'd like to see that improve for sure. When you look at their red zone efficiency, so today they were 3 for 4, 75%. And for the year, they've been 55.56. So room for growth in one. You want to see more efficiency in those 3rd down situations. I will say it seemed like they were in 3rd down less often than they have in the last couple of games. So staying ahead of the chains has been important. And they were more efficient today, at least in terms of red zone production. So, I do have to give a tip of the cap there. Hard to say how much of that improvement is where. I do think Shane Waldron was a lot better today. If I'm going to sit here on the show and tear apart Shane Waldron when I think he's doing terribly, I got to give him his flowers when I think it's better. We keep giving the caveat. We know it's the Panthers, but today it looked a lot better. I mean, there's only like 2 screens today? That was great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's showing some levels of adaptability because those screens just weren't working, and you saw them get cut down a little bit this week, and going forward, hopefully that'll be the case because you just want to figure out what's working and what isn't, and be adaptable. Like if there's a certain aspect of your offense or your defense that doesn't work, and say, okay, we're struggling with this. How can we make it better? And if we can't make it better, then just scrap it entirely and focus on something else. So I think it's, Waldron deserves credit for how the Bears offense played. There were a couple of, well-designed, route concepts that were able to free some guys open. I know DJ Moore had a deep seam route where they had another deep crosser going up against him. And, that rub route kind of freed him open for the big gains. So, hats off to Waldron. He definitely stepped it up this week.
Our Kombucha peak performance moment, defining moment from the game. Kombucha is a premium performance-focused kombucha crafted specifically for athletes and active individuals. This revitalizing beverage blends the traditional benefits of kombucha with nutritional enhancements to support energy, hydration, and recovery. Kombucha Aid is pairing up with Bare Bones / Wear and Tear this year, so go ahead and snag some. By the way, ran the giveaway this week. No one did it. So if you're sitting here listening right now and you want a chance to get Bears tumbler, Bears glass, a Bears keychain, a Yogi and Boo Boo Ditka print, a Bears hat, and a choice of there's 2 jerseys available, go ahead right now and do it. I'll keep it open for that. I'm going to post the link right now in the comments. If you don't have access to that link, just go to Kombucha and use code Bear Gut Check and go ahead. And you're probably going to be the one that wins it because, like I said, no one did it. So that's all you guys. Just literally make a purchase. Just shoot me a DM showing that you made a purchase on Kombucha with the code Bear Gut Check, and it's all yours. What was your peak performance moment, Jacob?
I think that the way the Bears bounced back from going back to the second quarter, they went for it on 4th down. They were in like kind of sort of field goal range. Like it'd be a little bit longer, like 55, 56 yards, something like that. They ran the ball up the middle on a fullback dive to Roschon Johnson. Didn't work out. But I think that the way the defense bounced back, particularly to, the second play of that next drive the Panthers offense had, Kyler Gordon and Dexter, split a sack. And then right away, Jaquan Brisker forced that fumble the very next play, and then Dexter bounced on it. I think that stood out to me as, all right, your offense didn't execute the way you wanted it to, but the defense doesn't get affected by that. They're still playing hard. They're still playing as motivated as ever. And I think the fact that you were able to, force a turnover, get the ball back to the Bears on Carolina's side of the field, and then Chicago was able to score a touchdown not so soon after. I think you got to capitalize on those opportunities on offense. And then on defense, if the offense doesn't get the job done, you got to make sure that you're, still playing with that passion. It's a little bit easier to get, to get a little down in the dumps about it when, the other side of the ball doesn't perform, but to keep fighting and to, keep pursuing big plays. I think that stood out to me.
Mine was going to be DJ Moore's second touchdown, just because we've been waiting for this deep ball accuracy to really start clicking. And also obviously the connection with DJ. But I'm switching it to his first touchdown just because how many times as a Bears fan have you been sitting there and the Bears give up a touchdown, whether it's on the first drive or maybe the Bears went 3 and out and the other team scores, and you just sit back and you say, we're going to lose this game. And then that's what happens because they just don't go punch for punch with any teams usually, let alone even potentially moderate ones. But anyway, the fact that, and I had the same feeling, obviously the Panthers score first, you're just kind of like, oh man, here we go again. And then the fact that the Bears right away went down, marched. Yes, there might have been a blown coverage or whatever, but I do think that actually that was good. Just a scheme up by Shane Waldron in that situation to free DJ Moore up for that touchdown. That to me to be 7-7 was huge.
No, 100%. And again, like we've mentioned before, the adaptability, the improvement from Waldron has been encouraging. I mean, we'll see how it picks up as maybe some stronger competition enters the fray. See if they're able to, maintain that flexibility in the play calling and the ability to learn from past mistakes and exploit individual teams' weaknesses. But certainly showed up here today, so I think that's something to be worth exciting about. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's as strong of an offense. This is the strongest offensive performance we've seen from the Bears all year. So there's definitely a lot to be excited about there.
Getting close to wrapping up here, our masseter player of the game, aka our MVP. The masseter can close the teeth with a force up to 55 pounds on your incisors and 200 pounds on the molars. That's a pretty heavy lifter for such a small muscle. Pretty important one, right? Talking, chewing, all that different stuff that's kind of important in life. So mine, finally, for the first time this season, is going to be Caleb Williams. 20 for 29, 304 yards, 2 touchdowns, 126.2 passer rating. Second time over 100 passer rating this year. This is really the first time I've truly felt comfortable saying, like, all right, Caleb, he won this game. Mm-hmm. Obviously, everyone else did their part too. The defense was amazing. We've already talked about this to death. The skill player positions did their job, but I mean, Caleb was also pretty fantastic in this game.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you there. That was going to be my pick too. Honestly, I'll mix it up just for the sake of, giving some other guys some shine as well. But yeah, Caleb did fantastic. Anytime you can throw for over 300 yards, score multiple touchdowns with no turnovers, I mean, that's a pretty damn good game. So, hats off to him. He looked the part of a true pro. I'm going to go with Javon Dexter. I'm going to go with Dexter with him getting 4 quarterback hits. He had a sack, but both of those were 2 half sacks. So there are 2 separate plays where Dexter was getting to the quarterback. And I think that, the fact that there were half sacks kind of, plays down a little bit of exactly how impactful he was. And then he had that fumble recovery that, I think it was Brisker, the fumble that Brisker forced, that Dexter ended up falling on top of that. So I think he deserves a lot of credit for his performance too. He's really come into his own, and I've been really happy to see just his development and, how many more big plays he's making this year.
And that was something that I think I totally agree with that, because Dexter was a guy much maligned in terms of a draft pick. Right away, as soon as he was picked, you have all these people talking about his get off. You have all these people talking about how, because at this time, right, Bears fans wanted some other positions to be taken besides necessarily that 3 tech that a lot of people hadn't heard of in a second round pick. Yeah. And then to double down, they got both Pickens and Dexter, obviously. So for him to make the leap that he had this year, I mean, yes, there's still things that he can continue to improve on his game, but if you can keep stacking the improvements that he's stacking, I mean, the sky's the limit just in terms of who he is, in terms of his size and athleticism.
No, 100%. And I'm excited to see him continue to develop these next couple of weeks, because we keep saying, and I feel like I've said this a couple of times now, where it's like, we keep talking about how important a 3 technique defensive tackle is, or at least a defensive tackle who can rush the passer. And the Bears have that now, at least as, through these first couple of weeks, they have that in Javon Dexter. So there's, you're seeing a guy who he's always had the athleticism. It's just a matter of how he times getting off the ball and getting used to, a difference in defensive philosophy, because not all defenses, I mean, I know Florida's didn't have their defensive tackles just, pin their ears back and go full speed ahead, into opposing backfields. You're seeing a little bit more of that now when Dexter's in Chicago, and he's cooking with it. So, he deserves a lot of credit for how he's made the jump so far in year 2.
All right, time to wrap this up. Prognosis period. A brief look ahead. Kind of what does this mean for next week? As you mentioned at the top of the show, Jacob, the Bears will be taking a trip to London to take on the Jaguars, who today won a shootout 37-34 against the Flacco-led Colts. Trevor Lawrence, ahead of the game going on the side, actually looked decent. Had a weird interception, because as Trevor Lawrence tends to do as of late. One thing that I'm really liking about how this is going to be handled, and this is already talked about, Brian Poles mentioned this earlier, the Bears are leaving tomorrow night, and that's going to allow for them to get there and really settle in. I love this. Your circadian rhythms are pretty gnarly, or so pretty important in terms of what they do for you, especially as an athlete. I mean, these guys are finely tuned machines, and the littlest bit shifts it. And the changes in your circadian rhythms can be very gnarly, right? So it's really anchored to the time of day in your departure location. It takes about 1 to 1.5 days at a minimum for your circadian rhythms to adjust to each time zone you cross over. So, you can get fatigue, insomnia, irritability, digestive problems, decrease in muscular output, decrease in cardiovascular health if you don't appropriately settle in. So the fact that they're leaving as early as they are, it's not a, hey, we're having a vacation here. It's just simply so these guys who are going across multiple time zones can really settle in and have the best chance possible against the Jaguars.
Yeah, which looking back and looking on it, like I don't know why more teams don't do that. I mean, some of it's you want to prioritize the practice aspect of it, whatever the case may be. But there's like you said, and much more than I would. But even making the jump as someone who's I've flown overseas literally once before, and that kicked my behind really bad. Those first day or two, getting used to the time zone, the whole aspect of how your body operates. You're not used to that specific time zone. You're not used to being up at a certain time, having to fall asleep at a certain time. So it definitely takes an adjustment period. I like the Bears just getting it out of the way, and then by the time that game comes, they're going to be pretty well adapted to it. I look at the Jaguars. I mean, they finally won their first game of the year. You're not putting up. I mean, I hope this isn't the case. You're not putting up 37 points against this Bears defense. I mean, just with how they've performed this year, that's not that's not the way they play. Granted, I don't know if you're the Bears offense and you're putting up 34 points on a pretty consistent basis. I mean, they topped that this week, but time will tell. I look at it as, again, a likely win, but I mean, you can never know. Anything can happen in the NFL, as cliche as that sounds. So I'm crossing my fingers. Excuse me. I'm not a morning person by any means. So I'm not looking forward to having to wake up and actually, analyze a game and, provide my opinions at 8:30 in the morning Central Time. But it should be a fun one. And if all things go well, it'll be another opportunity for the Bears to, maybe get a little bit of a win streak going, knock on wood, but 3 wins in a row would be a pretty nice way to, a nice way to get going.
I absolutely hate the London games. I get it. I usually am more football, more better for the most part. Yeah. But I mean, Sunday mornings when I get a workout in, or I play basketball, I do grocery shopping, I do in the fall things like I go to a pumpkin patch, and I now just can't do any of that. Whether it's because of the actual game or I literally then I'm watching football all day long, which is pretty tough to handle. It's also just like a weird vibe. I don't love it, but like you said, also looking ahead, besides the Jaguars, I'm super excited about this Commanders game. I'm feeling better about that now with a bit of how the trajectory of this team's going. Between that, the Cardinals game, the Patriots game, I mean, you have 4 games coming up where you absolutely could be 4-0 in the next 4 games. You could be 2-2 would be my bottom, I think. So that's a pretty good way to set up leading into some the November divisional games.
Yeah, and I mean, time will tell exactly how they end up playing, but at least on paper, things are looking pretty optimistic for the Bears. And again, the whole thing's been stack up wins so that when the divisional games come, you have a little bit of momentum, you have like this energy about you, you're ready to tackle it, and it's going to be difficult, down the stretch this year. The Seahawks are looking better than people would expect too. So none of those games down the stretch are gimmies. So it's now's the opportunity to stack up some wins and, position yourself better for the playoff race to come.
Robert Schmitz, if anyone, follows him, you should, had a post earlier discussing how this team really could be a playoff team. Someone had responded saying, how can you potentially be a playoff team? It was a Lions fan, I'm pretty sure, by the way, if you're the 4th best team in your division. Now, yes, on paper and purely skill-wise and a variety of those things, the Bears currently still might be the 4th best team in their division. But the thing to keep in mind is, as you go forward, I mean, the Bears have always played the Lions and Vikings pretty well. The Lions last year even, right? They were 1-1 against them, and they really should have been 2-0. Like, the defense just collapsed at the end there. The Vikings, again, you always play pretty well. Last year, really rough games for Justin in those games. But, I mean, they but they still play them very well. And then we don't talk about the team that's above the Chiefs curtain. We can't have that conversation until they prove that they can beat them. But with that being said, you easily, with that thought process and with what we're seeing, if you go 3-3 in those divisional games, right? Now all of a sudden it's a very different conversation than, fourth best team on paper.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you're looking at it from, I look at it from kind of the same lens. Those Lions games, like, until proven otherwise, I don't think the Lions will sweep the Bears. For that exact same reason, I'm not proven the Bears won't get swept by the Packers. But I mean, hey, anything can happen, so it's just, and the Vikings are looking better this year too. So if you can get 3 wins, in NFC North play, I think you're making the wild card. And I think that's a pretty good outcome in the grand scheme of things. So whether or not it happens, I don't know. It's going to be really difficult to get there, but things are looking good for the Bears. So, if they can keep building off this and stack up a couple wins, then why not?
All right, that is all we have. Your Chicago Bears won 36-10 today against the Carolina Panthers. All phases firing on pretty much all cylinders. A couple hiccups here and there that can be worked on in the next couple weeks, leading into that bye week. That's end of October, 10-20 there. Anything to leave these fans with before we get out of here, Jacob? Obviously, where can they find you? All the awesome stuff you do during the week.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate that. Yeah, anything, you can find me on Twitter, X, whatever, at Jacob Infante 24. My written stuff over at Windy City Gridiron, sporadic podcasts, here at Second City Gridiron. And then feel free to check out my Patreon. So that's, I believe, linked in my Twitter profile. But yeah, I do weekly breakdowns of, scouting reports for how 5 Bears players did the week before. So I haven't done it yet, but I'll be taking, I'll be taking requests for this coming week from this Panthers game. And then, within the next day or two, I'll have, scouting reports up for whenever the film comes out. So yeah, that's where everyone can find me. Yeah. I appreciate you, tagging the Patreon in the comments there. But yeah, it's good times. It's good times here. It's, exciting after a win like this to break it down. So I'm feeling good, Mason. I hope you are too, because I'm just, it sets the tone for the late afternoon and the evening when your favorite team wins it in a noon game.
It is pretty amazing how it affects my mood, not just the rest of today, like you just said, but also going into work on Monday. Everyone at work knows I'm a big Bears fan, and I just get every single person like, all right, how about that Bears game? And it's just like, it's so much better to have this conversation than it is when it's like trying to explain, just wait, give me a second. Caleb's going to get there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I imagine like after that Texans game, I don't know how it was for you, but I had people coming up to me in the office and, and they've got, fans of all kinds here, but it's like, that was really bad. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I know, and then I have to do the whole, like you said, Caleb, give it time. Caleb's going to get there. But yeah, I'm excited to go. Well, not excited to go into work ever. But also, I'm not dreading that conversation of, talking about how our favorite teams did that night from that previous Sunday.
It makes it much more palatable.
Absolutely.
All right, everyone, that's all we got for you today. Thank you so much. Make sure you keep up with Bare Bones Thursdays at 5 p.m. live. And then also obviously where you find all of your podcasts, keep up with Wear and Tear. We're going to be here pretty much every Sunday. There's gonna be a couple weird ones coming up. Like I have a vacation to Disney, so in October, so like there's some ones I will not be on, things like that. And of course, everything that Jacob is on that comes up on both Second City, Windy City. Bear down, everybody.